Princess Celestia, the Changeling Queen, by Vren 55. Chapter 13. Life-changing decisions. To be or not to be? That is the question. William Shakespeare. Hamlet. Cadence stood alone in her bridal chamber, clothed in her immaculate gold-trimmed white wedding dress. As she examined herself in the mirror on her bureau, Cadence placed her hoof on her chest in an attempt to calm her wildly fluttering heart. She breathed deeply, in and out, but instead of calming down, she began to tremble. The alicorn bit her lip and tried to bring forth happier memories. She recalled when she had met Shining Armor in Canterlot High School. She had always liked the stallion's kind demeanor and noble character, and found herself attracted to him. It was only during the dance where they both worked up the courage to ask each other out. Back then, their relationship had been very tenuous. He was constantly in awe of her. She was always afraid of driving him away. It was then that Cadence and the freshly minted Royal Guards pony, Shining Armor, were sent on a diplomatic mission to the Griffon Empire. This high-stakes political game was where their relationship truly evolved. Cadence had found herself back-to-back, sometimes literally, with Shining Armor. By the end of the assignment, past awkwardness had been washed away, and their love for each other was restored. Inexplicably, Cadence's smile faded as her recollections were swept away. A single question.
Then why was your so-called love unable to distinguish between you and Chrysalis?
Cadence closed her eyes, trying to force her fears into the recesses of her mind.
Why did Shining fall so quickly to Chrysalis's spell? Does he truly love you?
To her horror, Cadence felt panic rising in her chest. Squeezing her eyes shut, she bit her lip and winced in pain. But nothing could silence the dark voices that whispered in her mind.
I wonder what kind of fun Shining had with Chrysalis while you were gone.
There was a silence. Then knocking.
Cadence, may I come in?
Cadence blinked, spun around, and tripped on her wedding dress. With a cry, she lost her balance and shut her eyes against the expected pain. It never came. Warily, Cadence opened her eyes to find herself surrounded by a golden glow. At the door was Alternia, in Celestia's form. Gently, the changeling in disguise shut the door and set Cadence on her hooves.
Are you all right, Cadence?
Asked the changeling. Cadence glanced cautiously at the form of Celestia, but all she saw was concern.
I'm fine,
snapped Cadence. Alternia stepped back and eyed Cadence.
I thought Chrysalis was the one who played the high-maintenance bride,
teased Alternia.
Well, she fooled you, didn't she?
Resorted Cadence. Alternia's eyes widened as Cadence trotted away from her and began to haphazardly stick flowers into her headpiece.
Cadence, I know you're not all right. How can I help you?
Asked Alternia. The changeling trotted forward and levitated a few of the most ragged roses out of Cadence's mane.
Please, Alternia, just drop the charade. I'm not your niece. I'm not even the same species as you.
Cadence sighed. And yet the alicorn did not resist as the changeling continued to pull roses from her mane. Alternia smiled.
Cadence, you will always be my niece. Even after today, when you are carried beyond the horizon in a golden chariot with the love of your life.
Cadence blinked. Her lips twitched in the hints of a smile. Yet Shining Armor's betrayal was still fresh in her mind, and those same lips twisted into a snarl.
The love of my life who couldn't tell me apart from a bug queen that acts nothing like me? Exclaimed Cadence as she slammed her slippered hooves onto the table. Expensive brushes, polish, and makeup flew off the butte and onto the floor. Alternia's horn lit up, and before the items could hit the carpet, golden magic caught all of the items and arranged them carefully back onto butte. The love of your life who was hypnotized, a horribly deceived by a changeling queen in disguise, reminded Alternia. Cadence couldn't hear any condensation in Alternia's tone. Neither could she see it in the changeling's reflection. But she continued to glower at the mirror. That doesn't change the fact that he betrayed me! If he truly loved me, he should have known! The alicorn yelped, and the rose poked her ear and was forcibly spun around in her chair to face a glowering Alternia. Her magenta eyes were cold. That flash of disappointment Cadence had so often seen when the young alicorn had done something excusably wrong. Cadence, you should know better than any pony, perhaps even better than me, that love does not work that way. I know, wailed Cadence. Then, wait, you do know? Gasped Alternia, quite evidently taken aback. Cadence couldn't stop her uncontrolled emotions from flowing down her cheeks and sniffling her nose. I know, I just wanted this day to be perfect. But it's been anything but perfect. The alicorn turned to her view, trying to ignore the figure of Celestia standing behind her own reflection. Shining isn't to blame for anything, I know. He thought he was being considerate, and I know he couldn't do anything against Chrysalis's hypnosis. He's apologized so many times, and I've forgiven him. But that seductress, she shut me in the caverns, and... Cadence shut her eyes as she tried to block out the memories of the crystal cavern. She had stumbled around in the darkness of the caverns, dirt, mud, and dust getting all over her coat. Aimlessly, she had wandered, without food, without water, and when her magic couldn't keep up with it anymore, without light. The worst thing had been the silence, the cold, empty darkness. Except now, all she could feel were the two warm legs wrapped around her like blankets, shutting out the cold. Alternia rocked her back and forth, like she had always done. She could also feel the changeling shivering in anger, perhaps guilt. Chrysalis got her filthy old hooves all over my shining armor, and I can't help but feel hurt. I know it isn't his fault. I know it's over. But why am I feeling this pain? Cadence found her head tipped up by a cool golden horseshoe. So she looked up into Alternia's understanding smile. Cadence, you were imprisoned in an abandoned catacomb for more than 24 hours. It's all right to feel hurt and abandoned. As long as you recognize the fact the shining armor isn't at fault, you don't need to blame yourself. Cadence blinked and raised her hoof to wipe her nose, but found her nose already being wiped by a tissue held by Alternia's magic. Relaxing, Cadence allowed the changeling to fuss over her and reapply makeup ruined by tears. Silently the alicorn sat, feeling the familiar hooves of her aunt as she expertly added the final touches to her wedding look. Cadence, let me let you in on a secret. Cadence's ears straightened as she felt Alternia speak into them. Shining armor has very delicious love. Cadence turned and frowned at Alternia, who chuckled and carefully applied some blush to the alicorn's face with a puff. The changeling's emotions have distinct tastes, and love is not an exception. I'm almost certain that Chrysalis wanted shining armor because the love he has for you is one of a kind. It is a love that is so unique and complete. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't slightly jealous of you.
Cadence blushed, surprised at the strength of Shining's love for her, but at the same time somewhat embarrassed.
Alternia? She's mine! Get your own stallion! Squealed Cadence, setting her lips in a perfect pout.
Alternia raised an eyebrow. It was easy to see that she was trying hard not to laugh.
If you doubt me, remember that if it was the combined power of yours and Shining Armor's love and magic that expelled all the changelings from Canterlot. A stallion with love that strong would be the envy of all changelings. I think Shining's been traumatized enough by changeling queens chasing him, said Cadence reprovingly.
For a moment, Cadence saw a flicker of sadness pass over Alternia's visage. It was quickly banished. The changeling's voice took a serious tone.
All the more reason you should never let him go. Whenever you have an argument or disagreement, remember that he loves you.
Cadence froze. The intensity in Alternia's eyes stopped her from automatically nodding. For she knew what Alternia spoke of. In her travels to hone her powers, the Alicorn had come across many shattered couples. Their bonds of love were so warped that it would take all of her strength to even foster grudging respect for the other. Occasionally, she had to give up, for there was no love to be remembered. What Alternia was reminding her was a sad lesson she had to accept with her aunt's guidance. The moment Cadence came around to the realization, it was as if time had turned back, and she was a young filly, listening to her aunt's advice on what to do on the first day of school. There was no doubt that Alternia was the aunt she had always known, whom she had looked up to, was babysat by, jumped into bed with, had tea with, played with, and loved. Blinking away the moisture in her eyes, lest she spoil the work her aunt had done, Cadence smiled as wide as she could.
Thank you, Alternia, for everything. It was always my pleasure, Cadence, said Alternia, just as wide of a smile on her face.
Cadence trotted forward and was folded into her aunt's embrace. On her forehead, she felt the slightly warm brush of Alternia's lips before they parted.
I'll see you at the wedding,
said the changeling as she exited the room. Out of nowhere, an idea popped into Cadence's head. It was unplanned, desperate, but she knew it was the right thing to do, and perhaps it would make Alternia feel a little less guilty for her deception.
Alternia, wait!
Her aunt paused at the doorway, mystified, but Cadence's resolve didn't falter.
I have told you I have no parents. You know I was raised by a small village of earth ponies from my childhood. After I redeemed Prismia, you suddenly appeared. Yes, though now that you know my true identity, I believe that was the actual Celestia you saw, not me,
remarked Alternia. Cadence found herself derailed from her train of thought, and she stared at her aunt disbelievingly.
You mean... Yes, that was the Celestia of 1,000 years ago. It seemed that even within her coma, she can still access that special place. It seemed as if only alicorns can go to. I've only heard of it. But I digress. After all, you have told me of your meeting with her. So, what are you saying?
Collecting herself, Cadence looked up into Alternia's eyes.
Alternia, would you give me away to Shining Armor?
The changeling's features morphed from shock and surprise, to embarrassment, to pride, to overwhelming joy, and then settled on a wide smile and slightly furrowed brow. It was somewhat comedic to Cadence. Her aunt had always seemed so sure of herself, and she had to cover her mouth with a hoof to suppress her laughter.
"But I'm presiding over the ceremony," protested Alternia weakly.
Cadence would not be deterred, and she felt her eyes narrow. She wanted this, and she could see from Alternia's shaking hooves that she wanted this as well. Badly.
"Ask Aunt Luna."
"She's not going to be happy with you for this," warned Alternia. Cadence rolled her eyes, unbecoming for a new bride. But there were other things more important at the moment. She knew Luna could be dealt with if you knew what buttons to push. But would it be for naught if Alternia kept finding excuses? Why did her aunt have to be so responsible and selfless at times?
"Alternia, I will deal with any consequences. For on this day I want nothing more than for you to be my..."
Cadence coughed as she suddenly found the word stuck in her throat, and her eyes awash in tears. As she wiped her face, Cadence saw that Alternia was trembling slightly, staring at her in complete disbelief. The alicorn wasn't surprised. Alternia had been revealed as a changeling only a few hours ago. Cadence bet Alternia still hadn't forgiven herself for her deception. How strange that I, whose talent is in spreading love, was raised by a changeling who feeds upon love, thought Cadence, finally able to swallow the lump in her throat.
"Mother, would you give me away?"
Silence, and then a joyous smile, so uncharacteristic on the serene features of Celestia, but not upon Alternia's mask. The changeling cried happily and made no effort to staunch the flow of her tears.
Yes, please,"
said Alternia. Cadence's vision blurred, and she raised a hoof to wipe away the aggravating moisture. But Alternia conjured a hoofkerchief, pressed the soft cloth to her face. As the alicorn let the changeling wipe her tears, Cadence found herself cast back into her memories. A young Cadence, huddled in a strange, all too large bed. A few hours ago, she had been on an awe-striking tour of Canterlot. Now she was homesick and scared. The shadowy figure entered her room. She flung her tear-stained blanket over her head to hide puffy red eyes. Wrapped in darkness, the filly alicorn clutched her protective blanket over her small body. Yet the cloth barrier seemed to slip from her grasp. The alicorn shut her eyes, only to hear a sweet-sounding tune as the blanket was gently tucked around her. A quiet tune, both refined and tender, that lulled her away from her worries to a peaceful sleep. Filly mine, don't you cry. Filly mine, dry your eyes. Rest your head close to my heart, never to part, filly of mine. An older, but still filly-age Cadence slumped down as the boorish royal tutor went on and on about some obscure griffin history. Celestia walked in and woke her up with a playful noogie before she informed the tutor that he had his facts wrong. When the tutor protested, Celestia simply replied,
"Were you there?"
The still older but full-aged Cadence cried into Celestia's soft coat. Her pet owl, Islerib, had just passed away. A Cadence, the last of her full years, happily licked her strawberry ice cream cone. Celestia ate a spoon from her bowl of rocky road. On the tea table between them was the acceptance form for Princess Celestia's school for gifted unicorns. The preteen Cadence stared at her aunt. Alicorn's cheeks were flushed, and her jaw was agape as Celestia explained, in a very matter-of-fact voice, the more sensitive parts of a mare's anatomy. A teenage Cadence stepped onto the podium and graciously received the silver medal at Equestria Young Flyers competition. Even though she was so far away, Cadence could hear the cheers of her aunt. Senior year, Cadence sat with a giggling Celestia as they discussed, well, stallions. Particularly a certain white-coated, blue-haired unicorn stallion. An adult Cadence, bruised and battered, gazed up in despair as a griffin raised his razor-sharp claws. Shining Armor lay unconscious a few feet away, surrounded by a ring of immobile griffins. Out of nowhere, a golden beam of light blasts the griffin. A zap, and Celestia teleported into existence. Immediately she embraces the exhausted Cadence and teleports both her and Shining Armor to safely. Alternia? Yes, Cadence. I love you. I love you too, Cadence. Badlands. Chrysalis's Changeling Hive. The Badlands is known as a wasteland to most ponies. On and on stretched desolate land and dunes, baked red in the unforgiving sun. It was uninhabitable, inhospitable. Indeed, it deserved its name, the Badlands. It had a form of bare, scorched sort of charm. It also possessed unheard grandeur in the form of the Great Chasms. A great series of chasms that cut through the plateau, winding through it like cracks, creating a honeycomb of great red tableaus. Sheltered in the plateau's slashes was Chrysalis's hive. It had a multitude of entrances, some on the side of the canyon, others opening up onto the desert itself. The hive itself consisted of a winding maze reached all throughout the canyon. A multitude of passages, storage chambers, rooms, and hallways formed the home of Chrysalis's hive. This underground network was lit by small portholes to the outside world, as well as magic, changeling weirlights that danced in the braziers. Yet all that light, revealed now, was a dying hive. Hobbled, thanks to a gash in her leg, Chrysalis limped through rows of wounded changelings sprawled on the floors of the great hall. Infiltrators, soldiers, workers and subjects, scouts. The queen could see the frustration in their eyes, hear their moans as they nursed their wounds. Even within her thoughts, she was not safe from the mental anguish of the seriously wounded. Despite the futility of the act, Chrysalis ran into her private chambers, slamming the wooden door behind her. In the privacy of her own chamber, Chrysalis could finally step from behind the mask of emotions she wore in front of her subjects. In other words, she burst into tears. It had been a miracle that very few changelings had died in the battle, but casualties had been high, and many changelings would never fight again. It was only by the luck of the shield spell that had thrown them out of the hive of Canterlot had not been meant to kill, and the changeling's natural armor protected most of them from the damage. However, Chrysalis gained no comfort from this small reprieve and tears continued to splash onto the hard-packed dirt floor. Her victory had been as good as secured. The Royal Guard had been running around like headless chickens. Celestia had been defeated, the elements of harmony separated from their bearers, and although Luna had fought fiercely, she would have been contained by her army. Then by simply turning her back on Cadence and Shining Armor, she had made an entire month of careful planning go to waste. Now her hive's already dwindling love storages would be depleted. Her enemy, the Shadow Empire, continued to make raids against her infiltrators. Canterlot had been their remedy. While unwilling, the taken emotions and love would sustain them for less than deceived emotion, they couldn't resist the temptation. At this moment, Chrysalis wanted more than nothing but to scream in anguish. She had never hated herself more since the day she had taken the throne of her mother. Only iron will, honed throughout her years, held her tormented emotions in check. How could I, a 1,000-year-old changeling queen, have failed my hive now of all times? She whispered. In a whimsical, hiccuped voice, she whimpered. Chrysalis's dirge was interrupted by knocking on the door. Swallowing her sorrow, the queen raised her voice. What is it? She demanded. There was a momentary pause before the changeling spoke. Queen Chrysalis, one of the Chevaliers has returned with 3 others. Thank you. Now leave me in peace, ordered Chrysalis ascetically. Your Highness, it's Diamond Shell. Chrysalis blinked. Chevalier Diamond Shell had been missing since they had been thrown out of Canterlot, and Hive's retrieval squads hadn't been able to locate her. Just how did she get to the Hive so quickly? Hurriedly, Chrysalis wiped her tears and opened the door. Her searching eyes quickly settled on Diamond Shell and her 3 compatriots. To the Queen's surprise, Chevalier Diamond Shell and her accompanying changelings were fully healthy. They had no wounds, no scarring, yet all 4 changelings seemed visibly shaken. Chevalier, report! How have you managed to return to us and with such speed and in such good condition? Asked Chrysalis, her confusion hidden well beneath her stern features. Your Highness, Princess Celestia healed us. Then Princess Luna teleported us to the edge of the Badlands, stammered Diamond Shell. Chrysalis's eyes widened and then narrowed. What were the 2 princesses playing at? Was it a demonstration of their power to show her subjects were at their mercy? What else? Diamond Shell hesitated and turned to her soldier companion. He levitated a scroll attached to her back and floated it in front of Chrysalis. The princess gave us this scroll. It was to be delivered to you, spoke the soldier. Chrysalis frowned. She took the scroll in her magic, deftly broke the golden seal, and opened it. We, Princess Celestia and Luna, of the Equestrian Diarchy, would like to propose a truce to Chrysalis, Queen of the Changeling Hive within the Badlands, and her respective subjects. Should you accept, Equestria, we will pledge to protect the life of every changeling that does not further violate the laws of Equestria within the lands of Equestria. Ensure the safety of Chrysalis's Changeling Hive as a sovereign nation within its own laws and culture. Pledge to find an alternate solution for changelings to coexist with ponies with full and equal rights offered to any visitors to Equestria. Pledge to assist in providing Chrysalis's Changeling Hive with an alternative love source. Some assistance may include the Equestrian Diarchy, allowing a set amount of changelings to gather love in civilian areas. Our conditions are that
You will remove all changeling infiltrators from the governing institutions of Equestria and release all prisoners held. You will withdraw all changeling soldiers from Equestria's borders immediately. You will allow us to set up an embassy at your hive. You will pledge that your subjects will submit themselves to Equestria's laws within her sovereign territory. You and an escort of chevaliers will come to the Everfree Forest in 1 week's time since the delivering of this message, where we will meet you in order to draft the final details of a resolution that will fulfill all requirements. The Equestrian Diarchy will also be willing to listen to any terms or requests that you may have. If you agree to these conditions, then we, the Equestrian Diarchy, will expect to see you in 1 week's time at the Everfree Forest in the ruins of the castle of the Royal Pony Sisters. Should you not appear in the Everfree Forest to meet us at the appointed time, the Equestrian Diarchy will consider a declaration of hostilities between our two nations. Yours sincerely, Princess Celestia and Luna of Equestria.
The message was brief, to the point, but it widened Chrysalis's eyes and struck her silent. If she had any less control, her jaw would be agape. Celestia and Luna's terms were, in a word, generous. It was not a declaration of war, nor a demand of unconditional surrender. Neither was it a request for reparations. At the same time, Chrysalis was horrified.
Your Highness, what is it? Asked Diamond Shell. The princesses are asking for a truce. They wish to discuss a peaceful resolution and coexistence between ponies and changelings, spoke Chrysalis, voice hollowingly ringing in the corridor. What? They have the gall to ask for that? After all that happened? Roared Diamond Shell. It could have been far worse, spoke the soldier. Chrysalis turned her gaze onto the silent changeling soldier that had accompanied Diamond Shell. What is your name? And explain what you mean. Scarab, Your Highness. You see, all 4 of us were personally interrogated by the princesses and Prince Blueblood, explained Scarab. And, Chrysalis demanded as she arched an eyebrow. There was something the soldier was reluctant to tell her. The soldier hesitated. The princesses had the power to pulverize us, to rip us apart, inflict pain beyond measure in order to get information from us. Yet they didn't. The worst they did, or should I say the worst Prince Blueblood did, was give me a lecture. It was something I'd rather not remember. Although it was within their capabilities, they did not hurt us, said the infiltrator. Chrysalis blinked, confused. Why didn't Celestia and Luna torture her subjects for information? Was it because they were being merciful? Perhaps, but what if they had another motive? In fact, it seemed as if Princess Celestia in particular knows a lot about our customs and speech. Although she is 1,000 years out of date, remarked Scarab. Chrysalis's eyes narrowed as she saved that particular piece of information away for later, then turned back to the letter. Gather every able-bodied changeling except for the healers into the great infirmary hall. Immediately! An hour later, Chrysalis sat upon her throne, a cool, emerald-shaped and chiseled to perfection. It had a high back and sculpted armrests, all adorned with warm animal furs. As she silently sat, waiting for her chevaliers to arrive, she continued to read the letter the princesses had sent her. That damn letter. The queen forced herself not to tremble as she read it again. It spoke of peace, a way out, protection, and promise to save her hive. Try as she might, Chrysalis could not believe the letter. She just couldn't. Said she was afraid of it, of what it meant. The princesses knew where her hive was. While the wording revealed nothing, she bet they knew about her hive's dire love situation.
is the only reason they would offer such generous terms to aid in their peace attempt. They knew about the different classes of changelings, which meant they would have been able to identify how workers and infiltrators had been included in the assault force. The ponies knew everything about her hive's weaknesses, and yet were still offering her, the enemy, a way to avoid bloodshed. Despite all the damage her hive had inflicted, the ponies had appeared to have offered her salvation. If everything written was true, she was saved. If only everything written on it was true.
Mother, what is going on?
Croaked a frail, thin voice. Chrysalis turned slowly, searching the shadowy corner of her throne room. In the dim light, her eyes settled on the pitiful figure in the shadows, and moistened immediately. It was a changeling queen, or what would have become a changeling queen. Her jagged horn was snapped close to the base of her head. She hobbled. All that was left of her front left leg, the stump. Her face, the right side, had graceful features and a twinkling green eye. The left side was blackened, charred. Any distinguishing lines or features had been wiped away. Only her mouth was somehow spared. Once again, Chrysalis was reminded of how leniency was futile with Equestria. Any doubts as to her answer were wiped away.
The ponies set a trap for me, daughter. They offered peace, but I am not falling for it,
replied Chrysalis. Lamia, Chrysalis's once beautiful daughter and heir, raised her single eyebrow.
Mother, I know you hate them for what they did to me, but if the ponies are really offering a truce, perhaps we should take it?
Chrysalis shook her head, giving her daughter a pained smile.
No, I let you approach them. I let you get hurt, and the ponies showed us their true colors. Besides, it's too late, daughter. What we did at Canterlot has undoubtedly brought Equestria's wrath upon us. Celestia and Luna have written this letter. It is merely a ploy to capture me.
Chrysalis stood from her throne, trotted over to her daughter, and embraced her.
You should be resting, dear. You must be exhausted from tending the wounded, said Chrysalis,
helping her daughter to the smaller obsidian seat next to her own throne. The younger changeling queen snorted, but looked up at her mother, her single eye full of concern.
I can take care of myself, Mother. Just promise me that you won't regret this decision.
Chrysalis shook her head. These ponies had maimed her daughter, her kind-hearted daughter. They were hypocrites. All of them. She knew it had to be a trap. She would not regret her decision. In the shining city of Canterlot, Alternia proudly escorted her niece up the marble steps to the altar. Cadence was smiling radiantly through her wedding veil, matched only by Alternia's beaming grin. The crowd of ponies watched as the beautiful alicorn took her place beside her handsome unicorn fiancé. After touching, yet solemn ceremony, the two spoke their hoof-written vows. Finally, Luna put a single question to the bride and groom.
Do you, Shining Armor and Cadence, pledge to take each other as thy lawfully wedded spouse until death do part?
In the shadows of her hive, Chrysalis and her daughter raised themselves from their thrones. Her daughter Lamia leaning heavily on her single front leg. Despite the massive, tired, harrowed stares focused on them, the two stood resolutely. As Chrysalis explained the situation and the princess's offer, gasps and hisses from the changelings filled the hall. The noise grew until several of the senior chevaliers, including Diamond Shell, slammed their hooves into the ground. When every changeling was silent, a grizzled, old changeling spoke a single question for all the changelings assembled. Queen Chrysalis and Queen Daughter Lamia, whatever has been chosen, we will follow you to the end. What is your decision?
I do, spoke Cadence in shining armor, 2 voices in one.
We will fight, said the changeling. One voice for all.